In this video, we'll see how to install MySQL Server. So this is installing MySQL Server on Windows. There are a couple of options and we are going to go with the simplest option. So open up Google and search MySQL Server download. Okay, go to MySQL Community Downloads. Click on MySQL Community Server, and if you scroll down below, you can select the operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and so on, but we're only looking at the Windows installation, right? Now there are these two options here. You can either go with a zip archive and then install it, or you can choose the installer for Windows. The installer for Windows is much easier because it sets up the services and everything for you. It has a configuration wizard and it's easy to install. Now, we don't want to be an expert in the installation of MySQL Server or how to manage it. We just want a working installation so that we can practice SQL for data science, right? So choose this option, MySQL installer for Windows, and if you go down below, you'll see two options again. One is a web installer that's 20 megabytes, and the other is an offline installation that's 373 megabytes. Choose the second option. It's easier that way. You can also choose the first option if you have a good internet connection. So I'm going to choose the second option, download. And you don't have to log in. You just have to say, no thanks, just start my download. And your download starts here. Let's give it a couple of minutes. All right, the installation is complete. Click on that. And the installation starts. Accept the terms and conditions. Next. So there are 5 options here. You can choose to go with the developer default because it installs everything. The server, the shell, the workbench. These are the 3 things that we are specifically interested in. We need the server and the workbench. Maybe the shell if you want to practice on your own without Python. But most importantly, the server and the workbench. So select the developer default. Click on next. Now since I have already installed SQL Server before and uninstalled it, it says the selected path already exists. What this means is that you might have some data that's left out, like password, some data that the uninstallation has not cleared. Now this is a problem because it can cause some confusion. So what I want to do is select that, right? Go there, go to program data, MySQL, delete it. Since that directory is being locked on, let me just go back. Let me just cancel this installation, try it again. Okay, so that's there. And the next thing is there's going to be the MySQL installation in the program files. Let me quickly check that if it is there. Yes, it's there. I'm deleting it. Now you don't have to do it if you don't have those directories. The reason I have those directories is because I've already installed it previously and then uninstalled it, but the uninstallation did not remove those directories. Alright, let's start again. Accept, next, next. Now there are some requirements like this. MySQL for Excel, MySQL for Visual Studio, so on and so forth, which are not satisfied automatically. And you can choose to get the additional requirements and install them manually, but I'm not going to touch them at this point. You don't need any of this to practice MySQL or to practice SQL for data science. So I'm just going to click next and say yes. All right, so these are the products that are going to be installed on this computer. So execute and it will do its magic. Since we have downloaded everything already, it's an offline package. It's just going to unzip some things and do some magic. You don't need to necessarily have an internet connection at this point. And then the installation is starting, one component at a time. This is probably going to take somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes. Alright, this is complete. Click on next. And then it will show you how to configure the installation. So let's start with high availability. We don't need high availability, so just go with the standalone server. Next. So we will go with the development computer option because we don't need this computer to be a server or a dedicated computer, right? We just want to practice SQL. And the standard port for MySQL is 3306. You can just leave it at that. If you want to change it because of some conflict, you can, but it's not required in most of the cases. Next, use strong password. Yes, let's go with that. And then here you specify the root password. So the user ID is going to be root and the password is going to be whatever you give here. I'm going to say Ajay Tech. All right. And then I'm going to also add a user. You could do it later or you could do it here. It depends. For example, I could do something like this. Username Ajay Tech, and I'm a DB admin. Password is okay. The reason why we are creating an extra user is because root is like the master user. They can do anything, right? So we'll create a separate user so that we can practice something on our own, so that we don't corrupt the database. All right. Next, this is another key feature. Configure MySQL Server as a Windows service. This is an advantage with this kind of an installation, as opposed to unzipping it and installing it yourself. What happens is, as soon as you start your computer, Windows will automatically start the MySQL Server as a service. That way, you don't have to go start your server or stop your server. It makes things easy. Now, somewhere in the future, if you don't need MySQL Server anymore, you would have to uninstall this, right? And when this is uninstalled, this service will be uninstalled, and then SQL Server no longer starts during the system boot up. Okay, so we want MySQL Server to be started at startup, and click next. Execute, finish, next. We don't need this. Router configuration, finish, next. Root, this is just a system check. Connection succeeded, all good. Just make sure you remember that password. So start MySQL Workbench and start MySQL shell. You don't need the shell, just the workbench. All right, so this is called the SQL Workbench or the MySQL Workbench. Now the database is already running behind the scenes. Now we want to connect to it. So database, connect to database. We want to use the user ID Ajay Tech, our own user ID, as opposed to root. Okay. And then specify the password. That's it. So this is the MySQL Workbench and we are connected to the data. Think of this like a browser to the database. For example, if you want to browse some tables in the database, say take the world schema, go to tables and then say country, and then click on this button, the one that looks like a table, and as you can see, it runs a query, select star from world.country, and then the database returns some data. Basically, a set of country codes, country name, continent, region, so on and so forth. So you can run any kind of query here and practice your SQL right from here. So that was MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench installation.